Welcome to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and I thank you so much for joining us here on the program. I am going to go into the preliminaries later because we're going to jump right into our guests. So stay with us here on the program that provides you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We have with us a returning guest. I love having a guest come back again to talk more about where we started. And we have grief expert Rich Allen. He's the author of Keep Calm and Cope with Grief, 9 chapters for managing fear and grief when losing a parent or loved one. Richard, thank you. Rich, thank you so much for joining us again. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed our first conversation and how much I'm looking forward to this one.
Sure, absolutely, Richard. Thanks for having me back. Thank you.
I have been thinking about, and it's hard not to these days because of where I'm at age-wise, and thinking about my father in particular.
Hmm.
And I seem to, and maybe this has to do with another program, another interview that I did just recently with a gentleman about manifesting. And we were talking about, for example, the first step being, your thoughts. And you think about, you process, this is what I want in my life. This is where I want to be. This is where I want to go. This is what I want to do, so forth. And it's real interesting how many of these conversations that I tap into or videos, what have you, the father comes up, the conversation about the father,
Hmm.
which
Yeah.
of course brings me to my father. And I had a conversation with my older sister, and I was talking and sharing about my dad. And I contacted my mother because I wanted to get his chess set. My brother and I used to play chess with my dad all the
Mm.
time when we were
Yeah.
growing up. He taught us how to play chess. We
Yeah.
we weren't quite to the level of a Boris Spassky or a Bobby Fischer by any means, but we had fun. We had fun, and we learned about strategy and so forth, but also about winning and losing. You know,
Hmm.
that in a game like that, one person will be checkmated and the other will be doing the checkmating.
Hmm.
And it was certainly a wonderful parallel to life in general.
Yeah.
And so my mother's going to be sending me it, and I'm thinking, okay, so what am I going to do with it? Because I really don't have anybody to play chess with. But I thought, well, I just have this need, as I was sharing with my sister, to create some kind of, I don't know, memorial, if you will. I already have an urn that I had made special, a glass urn for my father's ashes that I was given. And I was sharing with my sister about how, we're different size fish in this big pond we call the world. When you think about this process of grief and we start kind of, maybe we get past a lot of the really emotional stuff early on, and it's not to say that goes away, but maybe it lessens a little bit as
Hmm.
time. And I'm not going to say time heals all wounds by any means, but um each one, I had this conversation with a friend of mine as well, who I says, I wonder if I'm going to be a big fish or a small fish. Am I going to make a big splash in the world, i.e., maybe being a corporate CEO or head of a religious organization or a politician, helping to make change and affect change in the world,
Hmm.
or am I going to be, and I mean this lovingly and kindly, am I going to just be a cog in the machine that keeps the world going, quote unquote, one of the little people?
Hmm.
And I made the mistake of using the wrong word with my sister. I won't use the wrong word here. It's okay to say on the air. It's just that when I said it, she was very angry. She understood where I was coming from, but she did not like it. I said, okay, the next time I talk about, I'll make sure to use a different word. My dad was a very significant man, considering the fact that he brought 6 lives into this world with my mother. And we have gone on to do our various things. I would say my brother, for example, he was part of the big fish because he worked for Disney. He was an electrical engineer. And he would travel around the world to the different amusement parks. So that means that he had some say in the design and construction of maybe some of the rides and so forth
Yeah.
at these different parks that people from around the world go to. So he has an impact in that respect. When we talk about this aspect of grief, is this a process that some people will go through, not necessarily judging the loved one, but maybe it's more a consciousness thing where we ask ourselves about this person's role in our lives, in the lives of the family they came from, if it's not our family,
Mm.
the community they lived in, and then of course, you keep going higher and higher, the nation, state, nation, world, and so forth.
Yeah.
Is that part of the grieving process where we take a look at that aspect of a person's life that touched us deeply? Because we'd like to think that maybe they were, I don't know, bigger, or they made a bigger splash than maybe they really did. But it was still an important splash, no matter how big or small it is.
Yeah, that's a great point, isn't it? I mean, I think we said, Richard, didn't we, last time we spoke, everybody goes through grief in a different way, and how we internally cope with it and externally, and how we look at our lost loved one and perceive them. And we start to recollect things and analyze things. And because we miss them so much, we start to backtrack, I guess. And I guess the point is we have lots of questions as well.
Yeah.
Um, and I know my sister and I are dealing with the loss of our father in a different way. She has told me only recently, because I was over in Liverpool about 3 months ago, and she said, I haven't started to grieve the loss of our dad. And we lost our dad in 2020. So she's told me she hasn't began that grief. She hasn't started maybe that process of analyzing, or whatever aspect of grief, however you want to look at grief, Whereas I started, I think, from day one. But you brought up an interesting um, point or reminder for me, Richard, because I remember the day after my dad died. The day my dad died, that evening, they came and took my dad's body away,
Mhm.
and they took him to the morgue. And the next day, at my mum and dad's house, it was late in the evening, and my mum and I was just sitting in the living room watching TV, and we were talking some. Anyway, my mum and I sadly got into a big argument, and it was resolved very quickly. But my mum started to share hateful things about my dad. They had a fantastic marriage, don't get me wrong. It was a wonderful upbringing that me and my sister had. But my mum started to say certain things about my dad being, possessive or controlling, and she couldn't be free because my dad was always like telling her what to do. And I said, no, I saw it another way. I said, well, my dad loved you so much, Mum. He was trying to protect you, I feel. And maybe that's just coming from a man's perspective.
Mhm.
But we had this conflict, me and my mum. And my mum looked at me and she said, Richard, I've just lost my husband. And I said, Mum, I've just lost my dad. We're both grieving. This isn't a competition. We have to look at it in different ways because we have different feelings. That man was your husband and your partner in life for 55 years, but he was my father
Mm.
for 53 years, and we're both grieving differently. I think it's unfair to point fingers, but I said to my mum, look, Mum, I understand no marriage is perfect, but could you please share these things with me another time? 24 hours ago, I lost my dad. I don't need to hear this right now. This is not the right time for me, Mum. I'm sorry. I want to hear your grief and pain, but not that part of it. So put it in a box, put it away, and we'll talk about it another day. And then she went upstairs to bed. The next morning, she come downstairs. I was in the kitchen making coffee. She came up and she gave me a hug. And she said, Richard, I'm sorry. I apologize. I was just letting off steam, and I understand it was the wrong time. I miss your dad so much, and I'm so sorry for bringing that up with you. I love him so much, and I'm lost without him. And then we cried, and to your point, I mean, it's how we look at our loved ones right there, talking about the big fish and the little fish. That moment, you could just say that was a little fish moment, because me and my mum are just two people on this planet of what, 8 billion people. But my dad had such an impact on us, just me and my mum, two people. And that's a little splash, right?
Hmm.
But if you look at my dad from another aspect, he was the chief education officer for the Liverpool Council. So he basically run the budget for all the schools in Liverpool. So in that, he went from, making tea for the staff in the 60s all the way up to being the chief education officer and to the top of his job. And he worked in the town hall. So at that point, he was making a big splash. Everybody in the schools knew him. He was so popular. I remember when he retired, there was over 400 people who showed up for his retirement.
Mm.
He was hugely popular. So that to me was the big splash. He was making it, he was the big fish then. But yeah, the same person can make those little splashes too, right? And touch our hearts because they're so close to us.
And I think too, the other aspect of it in terms of a big splash versus a small splash is that maybe his life, all right, I speak of my father, maybe his life was from one perspective, as you've kind of shared this, was a small splash,
Hmm.
but in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't. It was a big splash, and the universe requires all different sizes, if you will, using the metaphor of splashes
Yeah.
to make the universe function, if you will. Um, what just came to mind was a conversation I have with a gentleman I co-host a program called Skyview with, and we talk about astronomy, space aviation, and weather. And we were talking about this concept of dark matter, which
Ooh.
they cannot, you can't see it.
Hmm.
There's no, the only evidence of the existence of dark matter is mathematical. Okay, there's an equation apparently that verifies that dark matter exists. Well,
Mm.
when you think about it from the terms of sound, the old Simon and Garfunkel song, the sounds of silence,
Yeah.
it's the silence between the notes or the silence between the words that gives significance to the notes, to the tones or the words. Without the silence, it's a run-on sentence. I produced a project for one of my clients back in Phoenix, back in the 90s, mid 90s. Had not worked with the software for very long. She told
Hmm.
me what she wanted, so I produced it up. I took all the spaces out between the words. When I gave her the project, she said, "I can't use this. It's all one long run-on sentence." All right. So I learned that I needed to keep the spaces between the words. Um, so it's the big fish, the small fish, the big fish, the little fish, if you will, that
Hmm.
give us the totality of our existence, you know,
Hmm.
that without those individuals, uh, and I think about it even going even deeper into this, thinking about, for example, here in California, we have many, they say, I don't know the statistics actually, but a lot of migrant farm workers,
Hmm.
illegal or otherwise, who pick the fruits and vegetables. Seems like an innocuous kind of thing, no big deal. But
Hmm.
it is a big deal because without them picking the fruits and vegetables, putting them on the trucks then take them, they process, they can put them in the grocery stores or the farmers markets, and we go and we eat to nourish our bodies, to help us to grow, help our families to grow, and so forth, so that we can
Hmm.
then do the things that we do. So there's in a manner of speaking, sort of a domino effect or a cascade effect.
Yeah.
So that There is no unimportant task on the planet.
Yeah. Yep.
Even those who choose to, for example, live uh, off the grid, as they say, they want to get away from everybody.
Yeah.
They actually, maybe not through direct action, but through example, what they do is they show us, oh, there is another way to live. I may not want to go off the grid,
Hmm.
but maybe I want to incorporate a little. I need a little bit more isolation, a little more seclusion. I'm going to turn my phone on to do not disturb for a couple of hours so that I can have that isolation. I'm not
Yeah.
off the grid completely, but at least for a short time. So they teach us by example, okay?
Yeah.
And so on and so forth. And I just find that fascinating.
Yeah.
Folks, we're talking with a very special guest here on the program, Richard Allen, and we're talking about the work that he does. He has other books I want to talk about. We talked about grief in our last program, and we can certainly touch upon that more. I have a feeling this one ties into this a little bit too. Another book that is out there, and I hope you'll go to his website, richardjohnallen.com. Will be linked, of course, to his website. Heavenly Realms, a journey into the unknown. I can't tell you how much I love that that aspect of just the title alone. I love that because in addition to it being ever so intriguing, you know,
Mhm.
um, it's also something that is also very much feared by a lot of people. They are scared out of their minds over the unknown. Some people might use the term the great void, for example. It is a number one bestseller, and or actually, I should say, you are. And you've been navigating all this good stuff, but let's talk a little bit about this heavenly realm in terms of our conversation here. And
Yeah.
by the way, folks, this is what I love, and I'm just going through your books here. This particular book, Heavenly Realms, is also available on Audible, so you can sit and listen.
Mhm.
Did you record it, or did they have a narrator for you?
I've worked with a narrator in England. Excuse me. He's done all of my books. He's a great guy. He lives in the Lake District, which is in the northwest of England. So when I wrote my first book, Keep Calm and Cope with Grief, I auditioned many people, and I came across this guy, Paul Metcalf. I fell in love with his voice. Very
Mm.
crisp, very clear English accent. Loved it, and he's done all of my books. So I asked him if he would do my latest one, and of course he said yes. And it came out last week on audio. Yeah, I love it. I love it.
Well, I know there are people who, and I've had conversations with some who they're afraid of dying, not because
Mm.
of the process, but because they aren't sure whether
Yes.
there's anything after this. Now, I try to the best of my ability, help to calm them a little bit by saying, okay, let me tell you what I believe. I don't know this, but I believe this because of my logical mind.
Hmm.
It makes absolutely no sense to me whatsoever that after this exists this life in a human form. There is nothing. It's lights out. Now, if that's the case, I'm never going to know it anyway, right? Because
Yeah.
it's lights out, nothing.
Yeah.
But as I said, it doesn't make any sense based upon everything that we go through, all of the thoughts, the feelings, the experiences that we have. Some people have mystical experiences, which we're going to talk about as well, and so forth.
Hmm.
And to just come into this world, live our lives, however many, my father, of course, 91, and your father as well, in his age,
Yeah.
and then there's nothing really.
Yeah.
I can't. I choose. Let's put it this way: I choose not to believe that scenario. Um,
Yeah.
so, and then there are people who say that they know. Nobody knows because nobody has actually been there and then come back. Now, near-death experience, that's a whole different thing.
Yeah.
Because you're still in the same body. And they go through this process of exploring, these occurrences and the statistics and so forth. But what are in the context of this beautiful book, Heavenly Realms? What is
Yeah.
your perspective in that regard? And I don't know that you can take it out of your upbringing. I was born and raised Catholic, so I have that same
Mm.
kind of upbringing.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
but where are you on the spectrum in that regards?
I'm 100%, I believe. Two words, I believe. In my experience, since my father passed in 2020, I've had many, many signs from my dad, witnessed by my daughter, witnessed by my wife. So it's not just been me. Um, some of them you could say, well, it's a coincidence, or it could be this, or it could be that. But there are some signs I've had from my dad, no question. So that then begs, well, how can that happen? If my dad is truly gone and there's nothing, how could my dad communicate with me in that way? I would also share that there's a movie out there called Heaven is for Real. Fantastic movie. And this was about a true story. You can buy the book or you can watch
Mhm.
the movie. I think you can watch it for free on YouTube.
Oh, good.
Because yeah, it's about a 4-year-old little boy who undergoes surgery, and his dad is a pastor and he's married, and they take the little boy to hospital to have the surgery. Now, during surgery, the little boy doesn't die, but he visits heaven. And after the surgery, he obviously starts to share some of his experiences there with his father and with his mother. And they're very skeptical. Like, okay, he's a 4-year-old little boy, but the 4-year-old little boy starts to share things that he couldn't possibly have known from anybody else. So how did that happen? And he was very specific. I won't spoil it, but
Hmm.
it's a fantastic movie. So if you have any doubts, I would definitely recommend watching that movie. It just blew my mind. And there's a documentary on Amazon Prime. It's called Death and Back Part One, Amazon Prime documentary. And it's about four people with a near-death experience. They die and then they come back. And one in particular, the first lady, oh, what was her name again? Was it Erin? I think it was Erin, the first lady. Anyway, she has children, but she dies. And when she dies, she has an out of body experience, which she's literally in space and she's looking down on the earth and she can see her children. And floating in front of her, she sees a pair of glasses. And she thinks, well, they're way too small for my face. But she said, she reach out. So she reaches out, takes the spectacles, and as she puts them on her face, they become bigger and bigger. And the huge spectacles that she's now wearing on her face, and she's looking at the earth, and she sees these lights, these white lights, leaving the earth and going past her. And she immediately knows that these lights are souls. These are people who've died on earth and they're going past her. And when she turns around, she sees this huge planet and it's heaven. And she said, I just knew it was heaven. And she was just blown away, filled with love. And she's like, wow. And then she said she heard the voice of God and she was communicating with God, asking questions. What's going on? Where are these people going? And, who are the people on earth? Anyway, she said the glasses removed and she saw another pair of glasses. So she placed those over her eyes. But this time when she looked down at the earth, it was on fire. And she said, I could see people burning. And she was like, no, no, no. And she said to God, please help them, please help them. And God said to her, I can't help them because they don't believe. And only when they believe, I can help them and bring them to me to come to heaven. And it was watching this show, Richard, I was like, oh my, even my wife was watching it and we were like, wow,
Mm,
what a story, what an experience that she went through when she had died. And I believe she was dead for 60 minutes. So
mm.
it's hard to believe that the brain function is still there after 60 minutes of being deceased for it to be anything else like a dream. But that's what she shared with us. So again, I'd recommend watching Death and Back Part One on Amazon Prime. and it just might open your eyes to keeping an open mind
Mm.
as to what the possibilities are. But going back to my book, Heavenly Realms, yeah, I mean, doing research, talking to priests, funeral directors, people like you, my next door neighbors, friends, people on the internet and forums that I've spoken to, my local priest back in Liverpool, um, just talking to them and getting their points of view. I 100% believe, Richard, that there is a life after this and that there is a heaven.
You know, it's interesting to think about this because I have, and I don't know if I shared this with you before or not. Um, Another thing that adds, we'll call it credence to why I believe that there is something more after this. Whether it's heaven or not, I don't know, but it very well could be. Um, and that is, there's a gentleman by the name of Dr. Newton who has done, and there are several books out that I have read about what's called LBL, life between lives therapy, and he takes you through a conscious. You are totally conscious and aware. You can hear everything. Hypnosis, I should say, hypnotherapy, and he takes you back to your previous life. And this is, of course, if one believes in reincarnation, and then takes you through that passing from that life
Mm,
out of the human realm into the spiritual realm. And he documents what people tell him about what they're experiencing. And since we only have points of reference with our five senses, primarily, what do you see? What do you hear? What do you smell? What do you taste? And so on and so forth.
yeah.
And I've been through that therapy. So I have been through my previous life. And I got to tell you, uh, I kind of liked it. And it also explains why I am more of a pioneer, farmer type of individual than not, I guess is the way to put it.
Yeah.
I mean, we have chickens. We live a rather isolated and secluded life up above Santa Barbara. And yet we live close enough to the city, it's not that far away, and so on and so forth. I
Mm,
love being outdoors, primarily, especially in the spring and the fall when things are green or going to go green because we get the winter grasses and so forth.
mm,
And working, whether it's chopping wood or whether it's cutting the weeds down, the grasses to mitigate potential fire hazards or whatever it is outside. I just love being outdoors.
mm. Yeah, me too.
And so that helps to add credence to my belief. And I would say that your belief is the same as you've just described. It is a belief.
Hmm.
We'd like to say we know. I know that we would. And I would love to be able to tell people that I've talked with who have said that they're scared, that they don't think there's anything
Yeah,
after this, and then they're afraid of that. I'd
yeah,
love to be able to tell them, well, I know that there is something more. I
yeah,
wish I could, but I would be lying if I said I know.
yeah,
That
exactly.
kind of
And
thing.
that's a great point. I think people want to see physical proof. And unfortunately, these near-death experience people can't say, well, I died. I know I went to heaven. I've had people on Facebook tell me that they died, they went to heaven and came back.
Hmm.
But there's no physical proof to show that. It's just their story, right?
Yeah.
But
Mhm.
but at the same time, it's like, okay, well, prove to me that there's gravity. Show we believe in gravity, but show me it. And you can't, right? You
Yeah.
can't physically, or the oxygen we breathe. I
Yeah.
know we're alive because we're breathing up. Show me the oxygen.
Hmm.
Well, I can't really show you that. Or
Yeah.
show me that you loved your father. Love itself, that emotion. Show me that. You can't do that. So there's certain things that we have
Yeah.
in our life. There's no physical proof. Unless somebody can prove me wrong here, but I don't know how you can do it. So it's the same with heaven. People want to see that proof, and we
Hmm.
can't do that, unfortunately, not at this time.
Well, and the thing too is, of course, there will be those who will attempt to use certain I call them ancient wisdom teachings to
Mhm.
prove. See, it says it right here. So, well, yeah, that's fine that it says it right there,
Yeah.
but as much as you want to believe
Hmm.
that this text is something that is sacrosanct and holy and
Mhm.
divine and so forth. We don't know. You choose to believe that it is. I think one of my favorite guests that I had, and this is going back probably to the early 90s, was a Christian musician by the name of John Fisher. Beautiful
Mm.
voice. And he had moved to New England from California. Now, he was born here in the States in California during the Jesus movement and of the, I think, late 60s and early 70s. And he was telling me about how when he moved to New England, it was fall, and he was
Mm.
looking out the window of his writer's room where he would write his songs or his books and so forth. And the thought came to him, the question came to him, is what I believe or what I have been taught or told to
Mhm.
believe? And that's kind of where we're at right now. And it actually dovetails into another one of your books called Life After This, which
Mhm.
investigates the history regarding loss and grief. And you share, as you were starting, you alluded to real life stories of those with near death experiences and sharing conversations of people who work in the behavioral industry, such as the funeral directors, doctors, nurses, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
By the way, I interviewed a funeral director. Oh my goodness, this actually goes back to the late 1980s. This was shortly a few years after the introduction of aspartame, or what we call equal, the artificial sweetener. And he says, well, the only thing I can think of that's really changed in my business, in our industry, is we're using much less formaldehyde. And
Yeah.
it turns out that this sweetener, aspartame, back then called equal, actually turns into formaldehyde. So what we're doing is we're embalming our people who would ingest that. They're
Mm.
embalming themselves before they die. Really kind of strange. But
Yeah.
getting back to this aspect, I think I shared with you the last time this dream I had where I met my grandmother in this stone house and we hugged and I no word said, and it was just this sense of uh, I I am I'm everything's okay, Richard. Everything's
Yeah.
okay. And I'd like to believe that that was a message from my grandmother telling
Mm.
me this, even though she had probably been gone for, I don't know, maybe 10 years or more. Um, it was still good to be aware of, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's similar to when my sister passed away 2 years ago. And the first thing I heard was her voice saying, "Hey, Richard, everything's okay. Everything's okay."
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, I mean, you've talked a little bit about your experiences in regards to your father,
Yeah.
and I've been obviously sharing a lot of my perspectives and observations of my father's passing. I also know too now that I need to be a little more careful, even though my sister and my other sisters and probably my brother and my mother will probably understand where I'm coming from. It's still very important to be careful of the words that I use that will not incite anger and so forth.
Yeah.
I don't intend to do that. It was never my intention
Yeah.
for my
It,
sister
it,
to take it that way, but hey, we all take it differently. So talk to
it's
us a
a,
little bit about this aspect. And by the way, what's your
yeah.
feeling about reincarnation, having lived past lives?
I don't believe, yeah, I guess straight up, I don't believe in the reincarnation aspect. I know in Hindu religion,
Mhm.
they believe the funeral should take place within 24 hours and that souls are eternal and there is reincarnation. I mean, if you look at each of the religions, whether it's Jehovah Witness, whether it's the Islamic faith, where Allah determines who dies and there's 14 stages of, of, you know, life after your death before you reach paradise.
Mm.
So each religion has its own belief system, right? Before they reach the final destination. But the Hindu religion, believing in reincarnation, I
Mm.
mean, again, until we die and we get there, we don't really know, do we? But
True.
keeping that open minded, personally, I don't believe in that. I
Mm.
believe that there is a heaven and that I will be reincarnated with my dad in that way,
Okay.
but not back on Earth. I don't believe in that. Um, but but talking to other people about it, it's like you said with your sister, choosing the wrong word. I mean, even me and one of my best friends here, because we talked, when my dog passed away nearly 2 years ago, and I said, well, he's in heaven now, and he said, no, he's not. Your dog doesn't go to heaven. Animals don't go to heaven, and that upset me. And I thought, how could God create all these creatures who
Mm.
all have souls too, and not allow them into the kingdom of heaven? I don't believe in that. And we had that little disagreement, but that's okay, but we respect each other. But yeah, it's a very touchy thing talking about life after death or religion. We do have to respect one another's beliefs and
Hmm.
keep it civilized. That's
Yeah.
for sure.
It
Yeah.
used to be two subjects you didn't talk about at the dinner table,
Mm.
religion, sex, actually three, sex, religion, and politics.
Yes.
Uh,
Yeah.
and I suppose
Hmm.
it would still fall under the category of religion to talk about your beliefs
Yeah.
in death and dying. But
Yeah.
nonetheless, I think that one of the beautiful things, especially about this kind of a program, is that we're talking about them. We're not sitting here trying to make the other believe in a particular way. We're trying to understand where we're coming from, and that's
Yeah.
really what this is all about more than anything else is
Yeah.
wanting to come to a place where we can have a dialogue. My wife and I mean, she loves having conversations about these things, absolutely loves it,
Mhm.
because
Yeah.
she doesn't know any more than anybody else. you know
Yeah.
she's trying to figure it out too.
Yeah.
And if we can help one another to maybe at least alleviate the fear,
Yeah.
and that's huge,
Yeah.
then we've accomplished something. We really have.
Mm.
And maybe not have gotten rid of it completely, but at least said, hey, you're not alone. We're all
Yeah.
trying to figure it out. We're all trying to understand it. It's
Yeah.
okay that you're questioning. God forbid that anybody should start challenging the veracity of your search. I mean, you say that you're searching. Well, I've been on my search. I call it officially since I was 17.
Yeah.
That's going back quite a few years. But, you know, I don't think I'd
I
have
think
it.
you hit a point there, Richard, with the fear. It again going back to that physical proof because we really don't know, do we? We
Mm-mm.
haven't got that 100%. I believe, and that's a personal thing. But if we had physical proof, then how could you dispute it, right? Because there's physical proof, and like you, I talk about me and my wife. We talk about the same topic, and we have a really good, deep conversations about it. And if I can share this quick story, it was really
Please.
cool. We were sitting on the sofa. This is actually in my latest book, Heavenly Realms. I share this story. And I said to Alison, she lost her mum last year. God bless her. She was a lovely woman. Her name was Doris. She lived in a retirement home in Georgia and she passed away there. And of course, we were grieving and we still do, and we miss her so much. So I said to Alison, I'm going to give you two scenarios, Alison, and I want you to explain to me how your grief would be different in each of the scenarios. The first one, we're at the retirement home and you say your final goodbye to your mum, Doris, and she walks through the doors, the exit doors of the building, and they close the doors and she's gone. But you know that the scenario was she was going to go to the moon and she was going to live on the moon and live happily ever after on the moon. But you can't see it. The doors open, your mum Doris walks through, the doors close, and she's gone. There's no communication. You cannot see or hear anything. Your mum is gone. But you've been told that's where she's going. She's going to the moon and she's going to be happy there, and that's it. The other scenario is you say goodbye to your mum, Doris. She walks through those doors, the doors close, but on a huge TV screen, you can see your mum travel to the airport. She gets on a rocket, she flies to the moon, she gets off on the moon, and she goes to a new accommodation on the moon, and she's reunited with your dad, Mel. And she's happy and she's rejoiceful. You know, she's back with her husband, and you're like, you can't communicate with her, but you can physically see that your mum's safe and she's happy and she's well. So explain to me, Alison, how your grief differ from one the other. And she said, well, the first case, I'd be terrified and scared and I'd be upset because I just don't know. I don't know if my mum's okay. But the second scenario, if I can see my mum and know she's okay, I'd feel at peace. I'd be much happier. And I said, well, that's the difference of knowing and not knowing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it has a huge impact on how much the grief can hurt us
Mm-hmm.
because we just don't know. It was a fascinating conversation we had. Um, and it really told a lot to both of us how not knowing just adds to the pain, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. I think that that is absolutely true. And I know that, you kind of alluded to this earlier in the program about, we're as guys, we are trying to protect the people
Yeah.
around us. And I often think about that and I think, well, okay, I try to do that too. But at the same time, it's like, I think, I think about, well, ye shall know the truth and the truth will set you free. So I don't need to
Mm.
protect. I need to find a way to express the truth in
Yeah.
such a way that it does not elicit further emotion. Not that I can control that because that's up to the individual, but
Mm.
that will impart some level of
Mm.
understanding slash comfort.
Yeah.
And that's sometimes easier said than done. I mean, I argue this whole point regarding, I mean, this is a whole different scenario, granted, in regards to our government, and and apparently they're of the attitude that you want the truth, really, you want the truth, you can't handle the truth, to quote a movie,
Yeah.
and that's their perspective that we can't handle it. And I'm sitting here going, who are you to say whether we can or can't handle it? It's not up
Mhm.
to you. Tell
Yeah.
us the truth.
Yes.
I've often made the statement when it comes to who was in London. He was connected like with, I don't know if it was with Wikipedia or who it was, but he was there in London for a number of years, and finally, I guess they, whatever, that sort of resolved it. And then we had Snowden here in the United States, so worked, I guess, for the NSA or what have you, and he took
Mm.
information and he released it on the internet and to people and so forth. And the statement that I make all the time, especially when it comes to these kinds of things, is like, if you have no secrets to keep, you have no secrets to keep.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds redundant, and it is, but the point is, if there aren't any secrets, if everything's out in the open, then what do you have to hide? Nothing.
Mm.
So when it comes to our conversation about death and dying, about the hereafter, and whether there is or isn't reincarnation, and whether there is or isn't whatever it is, I
Yeah.
mean, heaven and hell, for example,
Yeah.
there are a lot of people who, who don't believe that there is a heaven or hell.
Yeah.
They still believe that there's an afterlife, but
Yeah.
as far as these realms that we're talking about, they just don't.
Yeah.
They basically say, no, I just don't see it that way. It doesn't. That also doesn't make any sense to some people. It's just logical
Mm.
sense. It just doesn't.
Now, if there
And
isn't a
I
place,
understand that
though,
as well.
yeah,
It's one of
if there
those
isn't a place, how
aspects,
do we get the
if I may,
signs?
that obviously one day we will know, because
Mm. Yeah.
because as my father often said, eat, drink, and be merry in moderation, because nobody gets out of this world alive. And one day I hope that I am reunited with the various animals that I've had in my life and the people that I've had in my life.
Mm.
Have you ever seen the movie with Albert Brooks and Meryl Streep, um, where they have died and they are, oh, I think it was Defending My Life, I think is the name of the movie, where
No.
they are, where Albert, oh, I should say Meryl, her character, she is having the time of her life. She can eat anything she wants. She can have all the different kinds of experiences that she wants. Whereas Albert is out of his mind scared, especially of the review when they go into the room and they start showing the various experiences. And he misinterprets why he's there. You
Mm.
know,
Yeah.
he's thinking judgment. I'm being judged and this, and he's trying to justify or defend how his life went. And it's like, but that's not what it's about, guy. It's just a review. It's just to say, hey, look, these are the kinds of things that you did. And, you know, I hope you had fun, that kind of thing.
Mm. Yeah.
Do you find it at all disconcerting sometimes when you start thinking about the afterlife and again, heaven,
Yeah.
or hell, however you want to, whatever you're looking at? And think about that aspect from the philosophical standpoint or the religious, because you had mentioned, of course, about Hinduism and what they
Yeah.
what they believe and so forth about reincarnation. What about this aspect? Does that, because you've got a father who's on the other side now,
Yeah.
and do you think that there is this kind of judgment, this sort of defend? You now have to defend your life that you lived, and did you do enough good works and those kinds of things? Because I know a lot of people, as they get close to what they perceive as the end, since we don't know when we leave, they start thinking, I better start doing some good stuff for people. I better start behaving, so to speak, so that I'm not on the naughty list. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So that's a great point. So Alison's parents both passed away when they were in the 90s. And I think sadly at their age, they were very forgetful, whether it was dementia. So I don't think at their point in life, they could right any wrongs in that point.
Mm.
But if you're young enough, maybe, and you still have your marbles, right? You, like you said, you might be thinking, oh gosh, time's going by. I haven't been as good as I know I can be. So I better start doing more good Christian things or neighborly things, and helping my family more, be more respectful to people, helping my neighbors. I'd like to think that we're all that way anyway, but we're all not perfect, right? So you're right. I mean, looking at life through that lens, we try to be the best we can be.
Hmm.
And certainly towards the end, I think it's kind of like doing a will, isn't it? You want to write a will and say, okay, I want to give this to my children, this to my grandchildren, leave this for my wife, should I pass before her, and so on. So it's like I want to put things in place so when I pass, I'll be ready.
Yeah.
I'm preparing for that launch off to heaven.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, all we can do is the best that we can, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I had a
yeah.
conversation with my sister the January before she passed away on the phone. And I asked her point blank, I says, "Are you ready?"
Mm.
She says, "Yes and no." And I'm going, "Jeanette, come on." Yes and no. And she said, "Well, no, because I don't want to leave my husband behind
Mm.
with all of the stuff that he's going to have to deal with." And but she says, "Yes, I am ready. I'm not afraid. I
Yeah.
know." And I think for her, I'll give her the latitude. She says, "And I know where I'm going, and it's okay." I'm curious because I've stated this on this program many times. We don't know. I don't know that I won't walk out the radio station to take a break and suddenly a bus will careen off of the street and take me out.
Mhm.
I don't know, or
Yeah,
anything else for that matter.
yeah,
And so we don't know our departure date. We know our arrival, obviously, but we don't
yeah,
know our departure date. So the question that I have for you, because for me, it's like, if today's the day, I'm good to go. Is there more I want to do? You betcha there's more I want to do. But again, I don't have any control over that. So
yeah,
I'm good. I'm good to go. I've done the best I can with
Yeah.
this life that I have been given. And, you know, if, for example, if there is this judgment, I'll turn to the judge and I'll say, okay, first of all, there's nothing that I can say
Yeah.
that's going to change your mind about where I'm going to spend eternity. All right, first of all. But
Mm,
secondly, since you are omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent, you knew from the beginning how
mm,
all of this was going to turn out. This is all on you, not me, because I did
mm,
the best I could. Okay.
yeah.
But again, I have no control. So do with me what you will. What
Yeah.
about you?
Yeah. You reminded me of something that happened in 1977. My family went down to the south of England for a summer vacation for 3 weeks during July, and it was one of the hottest summers on record. And
Mhm.
we went with so there was me, my mum and dad, and my sister, and there was my auntie and uncle and their four children, and we were all squashed into one car. And of course, back in the 70s, most people didn't wear seat belts. We were in the trunk of the vehicle, or I should say the estate. It was like what you call it, a station wagon
Mhm.
kind of car.
Yeah.
Anyway, there was nine of us, I think, crammed into this vehicle, or 10 of us into this vehicle, suitcases on the roof. Anyway, we were in Cornwall in England, 3 weeks, fantastic. And on the drive home, I'll never forget my Auntie Flo. She said to my mum, her sister, you know what, Nandi? If I die today, I'll die happy. And my mum said, what? Why would you say that? And my Auntie Flo said, well, I've just had the 3 best weeks of my life. It was such a great vacation on the beach. And I think to your point, it's like when you're in a good place in life and you think, wow, I've just come back from a great cruise, or my daughter's just got married and it was a fantastic wedding. You know, those moments you think, wow, everything's good in life. And you think, okay, if I was to die today, I'm in a good place,
Mhm.
you know? And I'll never forget when my Auntie Flo said that in 77, it kind of resonated with me. And even as a little boy then, I was only 11 years old. But I still remember that thought, that quote, and how it's impacted me thinking. And to your point, Richard, yeah, I'm in a good place right now. I feel good. I feel at peace, knowing that my dad is alive on the other side because of
Mhm.
these signs I get from him. So if I was to go today, I'm thankful that I will go to that place too, and I'll be with my dad. Um, but we each have to find that place ourselves, I think. I can't say, well, that's how it is, and you should think the same as me.
Yeah.
I've done my research. Up until my dad died in 2020, I hadn't given it much thought. I had lots of questions. I had my doubts. But since my dad's passing and having written the books and had the signs from my dad, now I've found answers to some of those questions. There's still many more, but it's made me feel at peace and more comfortable in the place I'm in.
Mhm.
And I give thanks for that, you know. It's not to say I don't get upset because I still miss my dad. Of course I do. And am I a little scared? Of course. I wouldn't be human if I wasn't scared. But I'm still comfortable with the knowledge now that I firmly believe that there is a life after this, that there is a heaven.
You know, it's interesting that we are conversing about these things, but there's also another element here. You made reference, for example, earlier to our animals, our pets that we've had over the years.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, I'm with you. That I do believe they're going to be there waiting for us with,
Mhm.
especially with the dogs. Not so much the cats because the cats are rather aloof, but the dogs are there with their tails a wagging away and their tongues hanging out and panting away, going, "Oh boy!"
Yeah.
Um, and one of the things that has really intrigued me in a very good way over the years is my understanding, though it still be limited, of nature. And I've come to this conclusion because you've written a book called Nature's Reach. And nature has a raw way of nurturing humans so that we can handle our grief, as it is the natural way. But
Mhm.
I find that nature, this is my statement, is our greatest teacher.
Mhm.
What do you say?
Absolutely. I mean, we watch the animals in our backyard all the time. In fact, there's a female deer or a doe that is constantly walking around our yard with two babies. And she will somehow, I don't know how, but she tells the two babies to stay in a certain location in these trees in our yard. And then she will wander off for hours and come back. And it's like, how do they do that? How do those two babies know to stay there and not move until the mother comes back? How are they communicating? So we can learn a lot. I wish our children would do that. But it's fascinating to watch the animals, how they interact in their own species and with other species. They are way smarter than we should give them far more credit for the way they interact amongst themselves. We can learn a lot from them. As you've said, I agree with you. I like to be outside as much as I can. I sit out back. I mean, as I mentioned in our last podcast, my backyard is my church. I mean, that's where I go to relax, to pray, to think about my dad, to gather my thoughts. It's so calming and therapeutic to me. Even when it's raining, it was raining here the other day, and I put one of the parasols up over the chairs so it kept it dry. The rain came, and I went outside in the rain and sat in the dry under the umbrella on one of the chairs, and it was just so peaceful
Hmm.
just to be outside in the rain and and watch the trees sway in the breeze. It's just so calming. But we can learn so much from nature, whether it's the trees, the clouds, the weather, or whether it's the animals. And peace is all around us. If it's right there, we don't have to look hard for it.
Yeah.
It's right there for us to watch.
I hadn't, it's funny. All I thought of when everything, when I thought of nature was the flora and the fauna. It's like, oh, that's right. The weather is also a part
Yeah.
of nature.
Yes.
I love the snowfall. Now I grew up
Hmm.
in Phoenix, so we didn't get snow quite that often. But since living here in Santa Barbara, and it's about a year ago, this past February, we had snow, an inch or two at least. I mean, it covered everything. It was wonderful. And the next day, which happened to be a Sunday, I believe it was, and we were home, and everything was white. It was clear blue, sparkling skies, and then the white on the ground. And I took a
Yeah.
whole bunch of pictures of it, and it was magnificent. It just was.
Yeah.
So I have to keep that in mind. Thank you for
Yeah.
the reminder that
Well,
it's
there is a technical term. It's called SAD, SAD, seasonal affect disorder. And
ooh.
basically, it's the seasons of the year, how they affect you. And in the summer, you feel great, right? You've got lots of energy. You're outside in the sun. You want to do yard work, or you want to go to the beach, or you want to get physically fit. But in the winter, you kind of feel slow, tired. You eat the food that you shouldn't eat. You want to sleep more. And it's that seasonal affect disorder, how during the summer the endorphins are released to make you feel good and you feel happy and you want to play loud music, and the world is alive, and wow, I look great in this new tan I have on my face. But during the winter we kind of become a bit of a recluse, maybe. We don't like the cold and we want to be indoors. So
Yeah.
you're right, the weather has a big part on how we feel.
Well, I will just tell you that for me, it's just the reverse because I have had my fill of hot summers moving from
Hmm.
Phoenix. So
Yeah.
enough is enough. If it gets over
Yeah.
if it gets over 80 degrees, that's when I have a problem. Because I've lived here in Santa Barbara for so long, I've become acclimated to the lower temperatures. And this summer, thus far, we've had some pretty warm stretches, but we're still here. We're still alive. We
Yeah.
um, we basically cocoon ourselves in the living room where we have our window AC unit, so we're comfortable. And at
Yeah.
nights, if it gets down into the low 60s or upper 50s, it's wonderful. Matter of fact, it was just a couple of days ago for the first time in weeks that we were actually able to open up the doors of the house at both ends to allow the cool morning air to flow through the house without the air conditioner on. It was
Nice.
absolutely wonderful. And to go outside with the chickens. I
Yes.
stand out there with Georgina, who she gets a little harassed by the other the other 7 hens. So I'm out there kind of keeping watch over them all and making sure
Hmm.
that they let her get some water and food and so forth. She's
Yeah.
almost like a puppy dog. She follows me around.
Yeah.
It's
I
very
love
cute.
chickens.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're great,
And
great
and I feel
pets.
that protectiveness that I want to protect her, but I also don't want to get angry with the others because they're just being who and what they are. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
By the
Yeah.
way, folks, I believe the majority of your books here are available on Audible. And one other book that we want to talk about here, we want to bring up here because this is a big issue. This is before we wrap things up here on the program, is a book called Look Up. And it's a book about coping with grief for children. And like adults, children have a wide range of reactions to grief and loss that can be affected, if you will, by multiple variables. I have to say that when my grandmother passed on Friday, the day after Thanksgiving,
Hmm.
and this was when I was still living at home. I want to say I was a young kid, probably in my single digits, 8, 9, maybe 10. And I was so emotional at the church that my mother almost had me removed because I was carrying on such because I loved my grandmother so much. In addition to being a fantastic cook, I loved her tamales. Oh my goodness. She's just a wonderful woman, and so forth. And that's one of the reactions that a lot of kids will have because they will get really close to their, not just their parents, but their grandparents. If you're lucky enough, your great grandparents. I have to say that I have a great niece and a great nephew who have had the experience of knowing their great grandfather, my father, and their great grandmother, my mother. And it's like, wow, they are so, of all of the experiences that one could have, they get to take that into their adulthood. That yeah,
Yeah.
I knew my great grandmother and father.
Hmm.
And that is just so cool. And I'm lucky enough that I did get to know
Yeah.
my great grandmother on my mother's side and my father's side.
Yeah.
And for only not that long, but matter of fact, my great grandmother on my mother's side lived to be 100, which is the reason why I want to live to be 100. I gotta beat her a little bit just for the fun of it.
Yeah.
Um, let's talk a little bit about that in terms of how this book that you've written, and I'm guessing that it's for kids as well as
Yeah.
about kids coping with grief.
Yeah, I think the targeted age is probably between 3 and 12. But honestly, I've had people write to me on Facebook saying that it's helped them as adults. So through my journey, losing my dad and writing the other 4 books, people wrote to me, said, could you please write one for children? Because, they have a child in their family who's grieving and they don't know how to express their grief or their loss or their pain. And I thought, wow, I'd honestly never given it much thought, but absolutely. So I put my head around this idea of lookup. So it's a picture book, but there's 600 words throughout the book, and it's a story about a mother and daughter. The little girl's name is Anna. She's about 6 years old, and they lose their husband or father. And it's about Anna trying to cope with the loss of her father. And there's a simple message in there, basically look up. There is a heaven, and that's where your father is. And it's been well received. That the reviews have been great. People writing to me, thanking me. And I actually joined the National Alliance for Children's Grief, which is a national organization in the US. And I go on podcasts with them and we have chats. I talk to people all over the United States about how we can help children with the grief. I make donations. I'm actually wearing one of their t-shirts. It's a wonderful organization because children, for the most part, can be silent grievers.
Mm,
Children are still trying to figure out their emotions, and they can find it hard to use the right words or express how they feel. So it's important that we recognize that and that we're there for them and to keep an eye on them. Because sadly, a lot of the children can go through mental breakdowns and it's hard to notice. We think, oh, they're happy, they're playing, and kids are kids, just give them a toy and they'll be fine. But no,
mm,
there's a lot more that can go on there. So it's important to keep an eye on them and be there for them and express your grief to an extent with them too, to let them know that it's okay. You know, if they're upset, that's okay because you're upset too about the loss.
RichardJohnAllen.com is the website where you can find out about all of these books that we've been talking about today on the program. And of course, starting out with Keep Calm and Cope with Grief. It's 9 chapters for managing fear and grief when losing a parent or a loved one. And by the way, look up for children isn't just for children. It's for adults too. I find it interesting, Rich, that there are some movies and television programs that are geared more towards children
Hmm.
that can really help to soften an adult's heart. You know,
Yeah,
they're done so well. Um, and I think that to me says an awful lot about the writers and the producers and so forth in
yeah,
terms of helping us to understand the dynamics and sharing that with children and helping them to be the best people that they can be. You know,
yeah.
I mean, like I said before, we're all trying to figure this out. You know,
Well, they
and
say we never grow up, right? We're still children at heart. So
Mhm.
you're quite right. These movies and books out there for children
Um,
can help us too.
By the way, that movie that you mentioned earlier, I think
Hmm.
we have seen that one. The young boy who uh,
Yeah.
starts to share his experiences, and he's basically shut down at almost every turn.
Mm,
And I learned when I was working for the Christian station back in the 80s and early 90s that I am not going to become dogmatic and say, no, it doesn't say it here. You cannot have had that experience because.
mm,
And there are two reasons. Number one is because it was their experience, not mine, and who am I to, to make them justify it? And
yeah.
number two, the experience that they have had, whether they be a child or an adult, has changed them fundamentally. And now I'm asking them to change back because
Mm,
what they experienced was wrong, or it was evil, or it was this or that or the other thing.
hmm.
And you know, I can't say that other than what I've shared on this program in reference to my sister and my father, um, I haven't really had a lot of those. I'll call them supernatural, spiritual, paranormal, however you want to categorize them, those
Mm,
kinds of experiences. But I tell you what, you've given me food for thought, especially when we were talking earlier about nature.
mm,
And what was the images that were running through my mind were of the oak trees and pine trees that are on the property where we live. And we have one beautiful, enormous, it's got to be 30, 40 feet tall pine tree. And
mm.
beneath it, oh, by the way, the name of the pine tree, Ben. We call him Ben. And beneath him, we have laid to rest a number of our animal children, shall we say. A dog, a cat, I think a tortoise we laid to rest there, along with believe it or not, a blue-tongued skank. It's kind of like a snake with legs and
Yeah.
literally a blue tongue.
Wow.
And we laid our latest departee, if you will, um, a Tess, a black and white, a tuxedo kitty, a beautiful female. Uh, and basically, when I lay to rest any of our animals there, I just say, "Hey, Ben, take care of them. They're here to nourish you, and I know that you will watch over them and care for them and so forth." And the images that were going through my mind were of me taking the walk down to that pine tree. And actually, I mean, okay, tree hugger, literally hugging the tree. Thank
Yeah.
you, Ben, for being here.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I just feel that's really important that we talk not just to the animals. We have deer on the property. We've had a
Mm,
bear. We have seen quail scurry across the roadway. We have blue jays. We have crows, and we talk to them.
Yeah.
along with I talk to the chickens.
Yeah.
We call them our girls.
Hmm.
We talk to our dog and our remaining cat. Um, I actually think that kind of helps.
It does. Yeah. And I'm sure they listen. It's crazy it might be, right? I mean, they, they, they have to. You've got no choice. But I mean, there's a deer that comes around here every day, several times a day, called Sammy, and I feed her by hand, and I can stroke her and pet her. And I was talking to her this morning. Actually, I was giving her some baby carrots, and I was just saying, "How was your day? I know it rained last night. Are you doing okay?"
Oh
It's
yeah,
just having that conversation with her, just that
yeah.
connection to nature.
Well, we have a female deer on the property, and they disappear in the late spring and summer because it's the breeding and the birthing period. But I
Mm,
know that we'll see them again, maybe before September or by September,
yeah,
to walk around. And we have this plastic wading pool, weighted down with a big old rock in the center, but that we fill it with water every so often, just to
yeah,
have it there for them, if should they want it. And then I got a bale of alfalfa that I spread around,
yeah,
because the grasses I had to cut them down again for safety reasons. But it's
yeah,
just it's quite remarkable.
yeah.
This has been quite the remarkable return, Rich. RichardJohnAllen.com, the website. And thank you so much once again for being a part of the work that we're doing here to try to help people through these processes. And yeah, it's interesting. I hadn't really thought about this until we started talking about this, that until that once you experience that
Hmm.
first loss, you are going to be at some level, scale of 1 to 10, a 10 down to 1 and back and forth. You'll be
Yeah,
experiencing the grieving process, quite honestly, the rest of your life. And it now
mm,
becomes a part of your life, but it doesn't have to consume it. There are ways, as you share in your
mm,
books, how
yeah,
we can keep calm and
yeah,
cope with grief. Oh,
yeah.
the title of your book. So
Yes,
thank you so much for returning to the program.
of course, Richard. Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
I'm going to ask you those 3 questions that I did before because the answers sometimes change. But
Sure.
before I do, thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. We are giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We are here on Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m. That's our special edition of Tell Me Your Story. And then Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m., that's 9 programs, 9 conversations, 9 guests. And we hope that you will tune into one or all of them, we hope. We podcast and we stream live at those times, by the way, with the podcasts on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and many other locations. And let's see, we're on YouTube. That's right. We hope you'll subscribe as well as click notifications so that when I post a new conversation, you'll be notified and you'll be able to tune in. We also ask that if you can help us out financially, we would be gratefully appreciative. I know I make the plea every program, but you know what? We're going to keep doing this as long as we can, and it's now up to 15 years. We're almost to our 15th anniversary on this program. It's hard to believe, but we're fast approaching that, and I'm also fast approaching my 45th anniversary of being in this business. August 29th of 1979. I was a 19-year-old kid trying to figure this out. And you know what? I'm now 64 and I'm still trying to figure it out, folks. But when you go to PayPal, which is where we ask you to support us, they'll ask you for an email address to whom you're sending the support. Richard@richarddugan.com is the email. Richard@richarddugan.com. And we ask that you spend some time going within and listening to that still small voice in that quiet, peaceful, calm space during this, the decade of perfect vision. And with all of that said, we now move to our final 3 questions. For again, our special guest, Rich Allen, author of Keep Calm and Cope with Grief. I hope you will go to his website and find out more. Go to richardjohnallen.com and find out more. Will be linked, as always, to the website of our guests. Our first question is, who is Richard John Allen?
I'm a Scouser, which is a term used for people from Liverpool. If you're from any major city in England, um, they have certain terms. So if you're from Birmingham, you're a Brummie. If you're from Newcastle, you're a Geordie. But if you're from Liverpool, you're a Scouser. So that's who Richard John Allen is. I'm a Scouser, and I do support Liverpool Football Club. Liverpool is my team.
Very good. What gets you up out of bed in the morning?
I think I mentioned this last time, Richard, didn't I? My wife, she's only a little girl. She's very petite,
Mm.
but she can clank around this house making noises. But once she's left for the office and I've put her bags in the back seat of the car and she's driven off to her office in Raleigh, um, what gets me up? Going outside is the first thing I do. Like we've spoken in detail here, going outside, and I always go outside to check on the ducks and the deer because I put corn out for them. So I go outside to give them their breakfast. So that gets me up in the morning.
Very, very nice. I can relate, certainly. And
Yeah.
finally, what was your best day?
My best day. That's a tough one, isn't it? We've been blessed with so many best days. My best day. Well, yesterday was my birthday. So I'd
And
like to give,
happy
I'd like to
birthday belatedly.
thank you. I'd like to give a shout out to my wife, Alison. She made it so special. She bought me far too many gifts, and she actually makes quilts. And what she did for me, she made me this huge quilt, and she put photographs on there. Let's see, six by 12 rows of photographs, and they were all photographs of the 9 years that we've been together. And it was very emotional because my father was in some of the photographs, my dog Amadeus, and Alison's parents, and of course they've all crossed over. So it was very emotional yesterday opening that gift. But it's a beautiful gift, a beautiful quilt. So I'd like to thank Alison. So yesterday was my best day.
Oh, wonderful. That's beautiful. Beautiful. Well, Rich, thank you again for being on the program, and we do look forward to having you back again because I think that in many instances with many of these programs, even if we repeat ourselves, it's worth repeating. And we're here to, I know you are there to
Mhm.
support people, encourage them as well, and they can get in touch with you through your website as well. So, once
Yeah.
again, thank you so much for being a part of what we're doing here on Tell Me Your Story to change the world for the better for everyone.
Thanks very much, Richard. You have a great day. Thank
You
you.
too, and thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story. New paradigms for a new world where we're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. Until our next broadcast, podcast, videocast, love to all. Jeanette, I am still listening. Dad, continue to be happy. Smokey, I'll see you on the other side. And to my dear friend Zorro, aho, aho.